Female James Worthy, please don't step. Tonight we going hard, life's magic sparks, and you might come pass across the 6'4" chick flinging all bites back with a shout. You thought that's Candace Paul. She may be a lady, Katie, past the Christy, cool as the AC, the ice princess, no room to fit there. She driving like a sign on the side of TK Chris. WNBA smoking, loving the best 'cause they all say hard. Tonight we going hard.
Well, good evening, WNBA and LA Sparks fans, and welcome in to the LA Sparks 365 Network, your 24/7 365 comprehensive home for the WNBA and your two-time WNBA champion, Los Angeles Sparks, back at you folks on a great Thursday night here on July the 9th, 2015 for this edition of WNBA 365. Good evening, folks, alongside Chris and Mancy via the Google Hangout for the first time in a couple of days from the Annenhart Studios up in Anaheim, California. Yours truly, Cal McClure, joining you here from a burnt-out Studio 171 in San Diego. Reason being, folks, the light bulb has gone out in here, so we're going to be doing the show in the dark, but luckily I've got the backdrop of both my desktop computer and a little light next to my webcam here that you guys can still see me. Hello to everyone out there. Other than that, Chris, how's everything going tonight, man? A lot's been going on over the past couple of weeks, or at least past the week at least, man, across the entire league in sports, man. Other than that, how's everything going?
Doing good, and thinking about going to my second Sparks game next week, but scratch that. Thanks to you, going to my first ever LA Kiss game this Sunday.
So yeah, folks, again, and folks, that brings me to one of our points we're going to bring up here about the upcoming events. Again, LAS 365 host meet and greet nights back-to-back with 21st and 22nd. We have a schedule alert about the first game. We'll get to that later on, though. But Chris, more importantly, though, to yesterday's game and to today's only game in the WNBA. And Chris, today, sadly, man, same old song and dance, though, for those LA Sparks yesterday, beginning the first of a three-game road trip as the Sparks yesterday faltered to the visiting, or to the host, San Antonio Stars by the final score of 70-63. And, Chris, it was a game, as I said at the top of the show, Chris, or top of this block here as we began here, Chris, sadly, you know, the same old song and dance, because you knew the story that it was going to be, the Sparks getting off to a good start in the first half. But again, Chris, shades of the 0-7 start, though, getting ahead and drifting off towards the third quarter, and then of course the gas tank running out on them in the fourth quarter yesterday. Chris, I mean, I know that we've kind of reached that. Most of the fans have reached boiling point with the team. Losing games and losing so early in the season, Chris, and of course the Sparks taking their licks, though, so early in the year without Candace Parker until either before and or after the All-Star break. Of course, Christy Tolliver being gone for those 8 games, plus the injury bug, Chris, with, Nneka Ogwumike being out, Alana Beard being out. But, Chris, in your mind, man, your thoughts on that second half story that was another LA Sparks loss in the second half yesterday in San Antonio last night, man, your thoughts about last night's game or what?
A very disappointing LA Sparks loss. Just pretty much it was going back and forth in the first half, and then towards the second half they just didn't happen and just fell short again.
Chris, the turning point in the ball game is the third quarter, simply because the Sparks only scored 6 points in that 10-minute third quarter session, and they conceded 17, the final box score for yesterday's game for LA. Nneka Ogwumike 16, Jantel Lavender 19, Mariana Tolo 4, but had major foul trouble, including 3 fouls in the first half. Aaron Phillips only had 6 and made 2 3-pointers in the ball game in the first quarter, and that was it for EP. KT 10 points and off the bench, no help either. Jen Hampson, no points. Tamika Johnson, 6. Andrea Hoover, no points. And making her season debut, Anna Dubovich from the Serbian national team. Her only 2 points were free throws in the waning 10 seconds of the ballgame. Faria Abdi and Elena Beard still injured with Abdi with a left knee, and Elena Beard with a left foot, and Jasmine Lister, DNP, coach's decision. For the San Antonio Stars last night, Danielle Robinson went medieval, 22 points. Sophia Young-Malcolm and Danielle Adams, 11 each. Kalena Green, 4. Derica Hamby only had 2, and she had a great game versus LA in the previous week. Off the bench, Kayla Alexander, 4. Jana Pell, 7. Samantha Logic, just recently acquired from Atlanta, no points. And Sydney Colson, 9 points. And Chris, I think that the loss stings a bit more because the Stars held out 2 players due to injury last night in the ball game. The injuries, by the way, folks: Gia Perkins, who left the game last week versus LA at Staples Center, DNP left calf strain. Kayla McBride, DNP, right foot injury sustained during their previous games. So, Chris, I mean, the Sparks, Chris, in spite of how they played in the second half, Chris, they could not take advantage of a team that has sort of had the same 2015 story. They've been off to a rocky start, getting victories here and there, but still, though, taking their licks too. So, Chris, obviously a game that I believe, Chris, and I believe that everyone agrees, was very winnable for the Sparks yesterday. But, again, the wheels coming off, though, in the second half, Chris. What has to be done, though, by the Sparks going ahead to Saturday against Tulsa in Tulsa, Chris? What adjustments have to be made for the Sparks to eliminate these second half lapses where they've had in pretty much every game but a few so far this season? What has to be done, though, for this team to really kind of crest that lift and get over the top and really play a full 40 like we saw the past 2 home games against the Stars and Shock, Chris? In your mind, what has to happen and why?
I think probably just have a nice meeting and just give probably Anna Dubovic more minutes and pass the ball a lot and get each teammate some points and just spread the points around all around.
Again, folks, Anna Dubovic making her season debut again from the Serbian national team in limited minutes, only had 2 points, and both their points at the free throw line last night. Chris, one more game yesterday in the WNBA. Yesterday, the Fever smoked the Storm 88-65. The Fever with the win go to 6-6, 3-4 at home. And Chris, the Storm with the loss. Boy, oh boy, you thought LA was bad, folks. Seattle now 3-10, 1-7. Away from Key Arena in Seattle. The final box score for the Storm last night: Crystal Langhorn, 8. Alicia Clark on a couple days after her birthday, 7 points. Abby Bishop, leading scorer for the starters, 12 points. Sue Bird, 6, and Jenna O'Hay, no points. Only had 6 minutes played in that ball game yesterday for Jenny Busick. Storm off the bench: Ramu Takahashi, 4. Angel Goodrich, no points. KML, 2. Quantriana Hongsworth, 4. Markeisha Gatling, 2. And Jewel Lloyd off the bench, 15 points. And Renee Montgomery with 5. For the Indiana Fever yesterday, Tamika Catchings, 12. Natalie Achuan, 9. Marissa Coleman, 8. Brianne January, 6. Shanice Johnson, 8. And off the bench, Lynetta Kaiser, 17 points, leading scorer for the Fever yesterday. Natasha Howard, 6. Erlena Larkins, 4. Jeanette Poland, 6. And Lashia Clarendon, 5 points, and still with injury problems. Maggie Lucas, right hip. Shavante Zellos, back. DNPs for Stephanie White and the Indiana Fever in yesterday's ball game. That takes us to today's real early game, folks, an 8:30 a.m. start on the West Coast today, where the New York Liberty were able to hold off the Washington Mystics in overtime and steal a victory at the Verizon Center this morning, 79-76, a final score in OT. Final line score for New York in the ball game: 20 in the first and 30 in the second, 14 in the third and 5 in the fourth, and 10 in the overtime session for the game total of 79. And for Washington, 25 in the first, 21 in the second, 15 in the third, and 8 in the fourth, 7 in the OT session for the game total of 76. The final box score in this ball game, again, the ball game played the night from the Verizon Center early this morning over there in Washington, D.C. Off for the Liberty this morning, Swin Cash, no points in 14 minutes played. Essence Carson, 6. And Tina Charles, my oh my, 21 points. Tanisha Wright, 12. Sugar Rogers, 15. Off the bench today for New York, Carolyn Swords, 9. Brittany Boyd, 2 points. Epiphany Prince, no points. Or scratch that, folks. Brittany Boyd, no points. Yes, I apologize. Epiphany Prince, 12 points. And Candace Wiggins with 2 points in minutes played. Rebecca Allen and Avery Warley Talbert, DNP's coach's decision. Stephanie Dolson keeping the Mystics afloat for the ball game today, but of course they faltered late. 22 points for Dolson in the ball game. Also tonight, Emma Meeseman 8, Kara Lawson 14, Ivory Lotta 12, Tia Ruffin-Pratt 10 points, Latoya Saunders in her debut no points, Bria Hartley 5 points, Allie Mallet no points, Taylor Hill 3 points, Natasha Cloud 2, and Arminty Harrington no points. Kia Vaughn held out due to concussion-like symptoms. Well, Chris, in spite of the game being held so early in the morning, man, I caught some of this game a bit on live access today when I was, tossing and turning this morning, Chris. And this was a game that I would have loved to have seen if it was a little bit later in the day instead of at 8:30 in the morning. Because, Chris, this was a very entertaining game, man. You had two great teams going back and forth. And, Chris, Tina Charles, man, a crucial play in the overtime session with a huge steal off a rebound that Stephanie Dolson fumbles like a slippery bar of soap in the shower, able to take that ball and lay it up for a big lane to put the Liberty ahead, Chris. And now, Chris, the Liberty are in sole possession of second place. And again, you made either the laughable joke or the all-inclusive right decision during the preview show that the Liberty were going to win the East Conference title. They're now only a half game out of first place behind Connecticut at 7-3. So, Chris, in your mind, though, man, obviously quarters 4, not the easiest of quarters, Chris, but in your mind, man, is this win or loss more so on the Liberty for the win or the Mystics letting this one slide on pretty much just a brain lapse in front of their own basket late in the overtime session? Is it more about New York or Washington and why in this game today?
I think it was about New York getting the win in overtime to get just a half a game out of first by Connecticut.
Now, again, folks, the Liberty win today, 79-76, a final score in overtime today up there from the Verizon Center in Washington, D.C. Here is the current WNBA standings as we speak as of right now at 10:42 this evening on this Thursday. Connecticut at 7-3, New York 7-4, 1.5 behind. And then bringing up the rear, Washington and Chicago both at 6-5, Indiana 6-6, and Atlanta at 5-7. And Chris, in spite of the Fever and Dream bringing up the rear in the bottom half of the standings, Chris, they're not even close to being done yet, man, because the difference between 1 and 6 is only 3 games. So, Chris, in your mind about this, man, because I know that we've talked about this when we have seen, Atlanta and Chicago and Indy, kind of scuffling, and we've seen the Fever and Dream, Chris, at the bottom half of the conference, Chris. Chris, if you are on Indiana and or with Atlanta, Chris, you're 5-6 right now in the conference. But you know though that you're only either 2 and or 3 back. About the midway point of the season, Chris. Where would you say your confidence is, knowing that Chris, you're in last place, but you're still though only 3 games out of first place? What does that really say though in your mind about pretty much how great it's been though to see turnover in the Eastern Conference, Chris? What do you think and why?
Just very great to see the East changing. And just 3 games out at first place.
Now, Chris, the East isn't the only jigsaw puzzle that's also changing, Chris. Out west out here, of course, Chris, you got the Lynx at 8-2, but Chris, the Tulsa Shock at 9-4. Second place, yes, Chris, they're only a half game behind Minnesota due to the games played and win percentage is the tiebreaker in that aspect. Following up the rear right in the West right now, Phoenix at 6-5. 2.5 games out of first place right now. Then San Antonio at 3-8, 5.5 out. Seattle 3-10, 6.5 out. And of course, LA 2-9, 6.5 out of first place. Now, Chris, out west, it's a bit more of a different story where you're not seeing the Mercury, right now at this point in time, possibly being like it was last year, 11-1 right now or something like that, Chris. Where, you still have Minnesota, Chris, up there, but of course, Chris, Tulsa without Skylar Diggins, 9-4, right there at the, right there at the threshold, Chris. The Stars scuffling, and of course, Chris, LA and Seattle also scuffling. But of course, Chris, how wacky is it? I think I asked you this, Chris, a couple weeks ago, Chris. How strange is it, man, that LA is 2-9, but only 1 game still out of 4th place in the West, Chris? In your mind, Chris, now we talk about the East, Chris. Where is it out West, man, where you have a team that's 9-4, it has a better record win and loss wise than Minnesota, but they're in second place because of win percentage, Chris, and also that you're last place team is only one game out of the last playoff spot, Chris, out west. You know, how strange is that to see that you can be in last place but be one game out of the last playoff spot, Chris? How weird is that and why?
Just very weird and wacky. You'd be in last place in the West, and there's only be one game out of the last place, out of the last wild card. Last spot in the playoffs.
Yeah, Chris, there's no wild card here, man. This ain't baseball. Sorry, I wish it was, but it's not. Sadly, again, folks, Sparks right now 2-9 in last place, but still though only one game out of first place in the out of fourth place, I should say, in the Western Conference. 3 games in the WNBA home front tomorrow. 4 o'clock game time. Stars at Fever, 4 o'clock p.m. 5:30. Lynx and Sky at 5:30. And then at 7 o'clock, Phoenix at Seattle on Friday. And then on Saturday, the Sparks are back in action after that tough loss yesterday. They'll take on Tulsa at home, where, Chris, it's a tale of 2 different stories in this game, Chris. We look at Saturday's game. Again, folks, Sparks and Shock, game 2 of a 3-game road trip against Sparks at Tulsa, 5 o'clock tip-off. The game, as of right now, cannot be seen on television because Time Warner Cable Sportsnet has a booking conflict with the Lakers Summer League game at 5 o'clock that same Saturday. So, again, we may not be able to see the game on Saturday on television due to that Laker game conflict for the Summer League schedule. But, Chris, I say it's a completely different story, Chris, because you have a team, Chris, in the Sparks, 0-5 on the road, Tulsa 5-0 at home. Okay, Chris, any early thoughts and a preview? We have the Sparks, Chris, again, looking for win number 1 on the road. Or the Shock, Chris, are looking for win number 6 at home so far, Chris. Any early thoughts and a preview? What is it? Go for it.
I think for Saturday, I think the Sparks are going to pull a San Antonio Stars move, just like on the Phoenix Mercury did, when the Mercury was undefeated at home, and the Stars got their first win. First win in Phoenix Arena. So I think the Sparks will get their first win on the road and first loss for Tulsa at home. Now,
Chris, it's funny to bring that up, Chris, that as you folks may remember, the Stars were the only team to beat the Mercury at U.S. Airways Center last season, and this year got their first win at the U.S. Airways Center, soon to be Talking Stick Resort Arena sometime soon down there in the desert. So, again, Sparks and Shock on Saturday. Again, folks, what I can recall, again, is due to the Lakers Summer League game on Saturday, at the same scheduled start time there, again, folks, the game will not be seen on local television on Saturday night. So, again, we have to apologize for that. But, again, Sparks and Shock will not be seen on local television due to the Lakers and 76ers NBA Summer League game that will tip off at 5:30 on TLBCSN. So, again, Sparks and Shock will not be seen on local television on Saturday night. Now, again, folks, that you probably heard me bring up about the meet and greet nights, folks. Now, again, folks, the event, again, is both Tuesday the 21st and Wednesday the 22nd now, folks. And, Chris, I wanted to bring this up, too, as well, that I just got word of this yesterday, and you probably saw me, Chris, post it on the group yesterday. But, folks, the annual Sparks Pride Night game will be held at our first of two LAS 365 meet and greet nights when the Sparks take on the Mercury on Tuesday, July 21st at 8 o'clock p.m. Again, folks. Now, also, with this game, folks, the game was originally scheduled on your schedules for 7 o'clock p.m. Please keep in mind, folks, that the game has now been moved to a 8 o'clock Pacific tip-off because the game will be shown nationally on ESPN2. So, again, that Sparks and Mercury game, our first of three, LAS 365 meet and greet nights for those 2 days, folks. Again, the game will tip off at 8 o'clock. Again, it was scheduled for 7 o'clock originally, but again, moved to 8 o'clock because of the game being shown on national television, again, on ESPN2. And also, Chris, and again, folks, as well, the Sparks-Mercury game will be the annual Sparks and WNBA Pride Night game held at Staples at night. And again, Chris, I think, man, that you and I had talked about this last year when the WNBA launched their LGBT Pride month and the Pride games last year, Chris, how every team got one game with either the rainbow attire merchandise, Chris. And Chris, I think, man, that as we kind of look at this, Chris, I'm sure that you saw, man, when the Supreme Court, officially ruled that, hey, it's cool for everyone to, for same-sex marriage to go down, Chris, and you saw everyone on Facebook changing their profile photos to the rainbow spectrum, or you saw me do it on Instagram with just the rainbow bars, Chris. That I think, Chris, it was not only was it a step in the right direction for society, Chris, but when the WNBA, Chris, became the first professional sporting league to really say something about LGBT awareness, Chris, that they were the first league to do it, Chris, where you have Brittany Griner coming in, who was the first public female basketball player that I know of, at least. I'm sure others have, Chris, where she was the first player to come out and say she was LGBT and that she was, she was gay, Chris. Chris, in your mind, did the WNBA do the right thing and also, Chris, set the right example for sports as a whole, that it's okay for athletes and fans to come out and say, look, I'm gay, I'm bisexual, or I'm lesbian, Chris? Did they do the right thing by allowing not only, Chris, the players, but also media members, and also, Chris, more importantly, the fans come out and say their piece about their sexual orientation? Also, Chris, does it help bring awareness, though, too, to not only the sport, but also, Chris, to the ongoing, or what was the ongoing debate, Chris, about, same-sex marriage, Chris? What do you think and why?
Yeah, I think it brought a lot of awareness to the WNBA and everything.
So again, folks, the every team gets their annual Pride game against Sparks. Pride Night will be held on Tuesday, July 21st, the first of our two LASU 65 host meet and greet nights. Now, folks, the following night is when the LA Sparks will honor the brave men and women of our military on Military Service Appreciation Night, when the Sparks take on who else but the New York Liberty on Wednesday, July 22nd. Now, of course, Chris, I know that we just had the 4th of July pass, Chris, and I know that every time that a important American holiday comes around, whether it's Memorial Day, Independence Day, Labor Day, 9/11, Chris, where we always all pause to, either say thanks to the military that, does what, that they allow us to do what we do on a day-to-day basis over here back home, where they're over, fighting for the stars and stripes and, adorning that camouflage every time. Chris, I know that specifically, man, in San Diego, it's a big deal where the Padres, of course, wear camouflage jerseys for every Sunday home game. They've brought the recruits out from the various military bases across the county here. Everything from where Top Gun was shot, MCS Miramar, which was, of course, Fighter Town, USA in the movie Top Gun, from NAS North Island, Chris. I know, man, that, Chris, the thing, though, that I love best, though, when the teams either wear the camouflage jerseys, or what we saw, Chris, in baseball, where they had worn the stars and stripes for their hats and their jerseys, Chris. The thing I love best, though, is when these teams, Chris, can bring back these soldiers, these moms and dads, these coworkers, these best friends, husbands and wives, dads and moms, Chris, where they can bring them home and surprise their family at the game. I mean, Chris, I remember one time, I think you remember this, Chris, where we were watching our main guy, Chris Angel, on Spike one night when he was back on after a brief hiatus, Chris, how he literally, stuck a person of unknown origin, in a chair, put a blanket over the guy, and had, the person's wife, basically, use an iPad to write down a few things, and to see Chris Angel bring this guy home, Chris, or to see the Padres do this, Chris, does it warm your heart, Chris, when either celebrities, or mostly, Chris, in our case here with the sport, Chris, where these teams bring out either these wounded vets, Chris, or even, Chris, bring a family member home to surprise their family at a game, Chris? What does it really say, though, about sports in general bringing back these brave souls from the war?
Just very great and awesome to see that, bringing soldiers back to their families and everything. Just very great to see it.
Very great and very, very tear-jerking and very, very emotional, folks, from someone who comes from a military family, from Navy and Marine Corps over here in San Diego, with a grandfather who was a retired military drill instructor to a Master Chief of the U.S. Navy. Love seeing that happen. So again, folks, Pride Night, LGBT Sparks Pride Night, July 21st versus Phoenix. Again, folks, 8 o'clock tip-off, not 7 p.m. as it says on your schedule. Again, 8 o'clock tip-off. Game can be seen on ESPN2, and also on Wednesday, Sparks Military Service Night, Sparks and Liberty at 7:30 at Staples Center. And, of course, I'll be at both those games. So, again, please come say hi at our second and third LASU 65 host meet and greet nights. Now, Chris, Obviously, man, not a lot else to get to tonight on the program. Of course, we've been off the past couple days to allow me to either get through the last few things I have to do for school, or needing time off. Other than that, Chris, there's not much else happening. So, Chris, I guess I'll let you say this here, Chris. What in the world is going on with you on Sunday? Go for it.
Going to my first, can't believe I'm saying it again, first ever LA Kiss game, Sunday, my backyard in Honda Center. Just can't wait, even though they're last place. It don't matter. It'll be great. And like I text someone, it's only their, I think it's second season in the league. Just got to give them time, and they'll be on top.
Now, folks, that leads me to tonight's Sparks fan. Even though I'm a show tonight, folks, but tonight's question of the night. Now, as you guys may know, San Diego, California, my hometown and my backyard, is home to Comic-Con, the largest comic exhibit in the entire globe. People have flocked to San Diego for the first of 4 days today, which closed about 55 minutes ago, folks. With that, so Chris, with Comic-Con starting today and running through Sunday, that gave me the idea, Chris, to ask the question, folks. You guys can tweet us in as well at LA Sparks 365. But Chris, that gave me an idea, Chris, to ask tonight's question, folks. Here is the question of the night. Who is your favorite superhero of any comic strip, whether it's DC or Marvel? Chris, we'll let you start. Who is it and why?
It's Captain America. I watched the movie. Forgot what it was.
One of the Avenger movies, but go on.
Yeah, that's what it was. I think it was last month, I want to say, with my girlfriend, and it was awesome.
You know, Chris, I'm not one for comic books. I mean, I'm into sci-fi. I'm into Star Wars. I'm a huge Star Wars geek, folks. You guys didn't know that. Now you know I'm a huge Star Wars geek. I'm ready for Episode 7 in a couple of months. But I always get torn about, you know, who is my favorite superhero. I mean, I really have never been asked a question about if I had a superhero special power or something. I've never been asked that question. Sadly, I never have. But if I had to pick one, and Chris, I don't even know if it's like a superhero. I mean, you know, if I had to pick like an actual comic book one, I have no idea why, folks, but I would be the Human Torch from Fantastic Four. That is the guy I've loved for a long time. Or if not, I'd be the Silver Surfer, because I'm a huge surfer, as you guys may see. My surfboard's always behind me here. You know, it is my endless summer and in the search for the perfect wave. So if I had to pick one or two, the Human Torch and/or the Silver Surfer from Fantastic Four are my two choices. Well, we had Crystal Thomas tweet into the show. She says, she tweeted in, I want to say before the show started, she said her favorite superhero is myself. It takes bravery to handle what I am. So I would assume that. So, of course, you can take your thoughts on that. So, again, folks, who's your favorite superhero of all time? Let us know on Twitter with your responses later on or next time on the program. But, again, that's the question of the night. So, again, Chris said Captain America. I said either the Silver Surfer or the Human Torch for my pick and observation. Again, for my favorite superhero, and, of course, folks, Comic-Con going until Sunday here in San Diego at the downtown San Diego Convention Center. With that, Chris, we're getting ready to close up shop for the night. Your final thoughts on last night's tough game for the Sparks and anything else, including you want to get off your chest, go for it.
Just another disappointing loss by the Sparks, and just can't wait for Saturday, the Sparks' first win on the road.
Again, folks, to clarify again, the Sparks and Shock game will not be shown on local television due to the Lakers and 76ers NBA Summer League game at 5:30 on TWCS. And so, again, no television for the game on Saturday against the Tulsa Shock. And the Sparks' next home game is next Thursday against the Atlanta Dream at 12:30. That game can be seen on Time Warner Cable Sportsnet and Time Warner Cable Deportes. With that, folks, until sometime this week or maybe next week, please have a safe night. Drive home safely. Thank you all for coming, and good night now. This has been the LA Sparks 365 Network. We are Sparks. We are LA. We are the WNBA. We'll see folks back here sometime soon. Have a great night. See you next time. Bye-bye.